I'm not asserting or insinuating that BetterHelp has their own AI model, but I do think that if folks had that feeling or had a suspicion about that based on this statement, I would understand why they felt that way. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. And today, we're talking about something that we have talked about before because, wouldn't you know it, BetterHelp has found themselves in the news yet again for not a good reason, for not a good thing, which seems to be happening a lot for BetterHelp. I'm really grieved by that information. Super sad. In case you're not familiar, I have been on the receiving end of BetterHelp's legal department. We'll talk about that later. So in case you're wondering why I have such a bitch-eating crackers affect about BetterHelp, that's why. It's because I hate them. So that's my own personal opinion, by the way. Just my thoughts, just my feelings. Just here to share my thoughts and feelings and some allegations, some unproven allegations. I'm simply here to report to you some of the things that other people have alleged for the purpose of compiling some allegations and some statements that other people have made based on their opinions and their feelings for the purpose of it all existing in one video so that you can hear and be aware of what the allegations are this time against BetterHelp. Let's not get that twisted. Also, hi to the unfortunate intern at BetterHelp's headquarters that's probably being forced to watch this video. So sorry. Fuck your boss on your behalf and mine. So we're talking about BetterHelp's controversy in allegedly their BetterHelp therapists having used AI to speak to and interact with their clients. In case you're not familiar, there are some allegations about BetterHelp therapists being caught replying to comments in their text-based communications by essentially copy-pasting things that they have allegedly, purportedly procured by putting some information into an AI chatbot. AI is getting a lot of coverage. There's a lot of headlines about AI these days for a lot of reasons. Some of them are positive, I would say, but a lot of them are negative. Notably, for example, that AI art is inherently stealing things from small artists. Fuck AI for that. Fuck the people who made the AI for that. But also for the implications and the negative ways that it's affecting schools and students, especially, particularly in the advent of a telehealth. It's not telehealth, girl. What is a virtual school in a world since the existence of COVID? Students and schools using AI, especially for things like turning in papers and that's gotten a lot of negative attention, especially in the way that it affects our critical thinking skills.
First graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year.
Also worth noting that there's a lot of coverage about how bad we are actually at identifying things that are AI, which is very concerning. But now, apparently, therapy is being negatively affected by AI, which I want to say that I'm surprised by, but I'm not. Real quick, I want to say thank you to this week's sponsor, which is Aura Frames. Aura Frames are Wi-Fi connected digital picture frames that you can add photos to straight from your phone with the Aura app. And shout out to Aura for their app being so intuitive, so easy to use. Even my parents think it's easy to use, which is great because I am so happy with mine that I immediately went out and got my parents one for Mother's Day and Father's Day because I don't know about y'all, but my family every year, all they want as gifts are photos. We live far from each other. And so logistically, it's a challenge. However, because multiple people can add to one frame, my sibling and I can share photos of our families with my parents, so we all get to feel connected. It's very cute. Aura Frames was voted the best digital photo frame by Wirecutter and featured in 495 gift guides last year, and it shows. My whole family loves these things. There is also unlimited storage, so I can add every single photo of my cats that I've ever taken to my own frame and to my parents' frame without running out of space. Aura also has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, viewers can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get 35% off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's AURA frames.com with promo code Mickey. Go support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you again to Aura Frames. Now let's get back to the video. So in case you were unfamiliar with the allegations, essentially there are some headlines and some content creators that have reported on what a few folks have alleged, which is that BetterHelp users have stated they suspect their therapists have had been caught using AI. There is allegedly one therapist who apparently copped to using AI. I'll put the screenshots up here. That article came from Medium. That article details the story of one BetterHelp user allegedly being suspicious that their therapist had replied by using an AI-generated response. I'll put the photo of that up now so you can read that as well. But when asked about it, the BetterHelp therapist allegedly said that they do, in fact, sometimes use AI for the purpose of compiling their thoughts. Again, this is all alleged. These are simply things that people on the internet have said. I'm not asserting that that's true, nor am I leveling an accusation at a company. I'm just reporting to you what other people have said. Notably, though, more than one person has alleged that this has happened in their interactions with their BetterHelp therapist. This has, I think, reignited the debate for a lot of people about BetterHelp's payment structure, because that seems to be kind of at the core of why potentially, allegedly, BetterHelp therapists may be using AI to interact with their clients. Okay, so we talked about this in a prior video. I will put that up here. We've actually talked about BetterHelp quite a few times, one of which you're not going to be able to see because I had to take the video down. More details on that later. But in case you're not familiar, the BetterHelp payment structure is a little bit of an elusive thing. Seems like a difficult thing to nail down unless you're a therapist who works for BetterHelp. However, thankfully for me, I do in fact have therapist friends who have chosen to stay anonymous for the purpose of this video. But those folks and some other folks online have alleged that BetterHelp therapists are paid in a shitty and not great way, sometimes reporting that they are paid as little as $35 an hour, which if you're not familiar, is not a lot of money for therapy. Let's be very clear. Everybody deserves to make a living wage, and $35 an hour for a lot of people would be actually a good rate of compensation. And for folks who have tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans and are propping up their practices by having to cover costs of hiring employees and paying an accountant and paying to keep the lights on and paying for supplies and, hiring a lawyer and paying for their licensure and their continued education units and, their student loans and all of those things, right? That compensation rate is really not great, especially considering the pretty heavy emotional investment that therapy requires, right? Therapists love our jobs and we really, I would say most of us relish the opportunity to be part of people well and truly changing their lives. Obviously, that is a pretty good dopamine hit, I would say. And we deserve to get paid for labor intensive and skilled labor. And so $35 an hour is not great, allegedly, right? The other thing here is that some folks have alleged that beyond just not paying a great wage as far as therapy is concerned, there are also allegations that BetterHelp has compensated their therapists through the use of a word count. This is a little bit confusing. For the sake of making this easily digestible, we go into more detail about it in the other video, so check that out if you're curious. But to keep it light, keep it simple. The allegations are that BetterHelp compensates therapists for their chat reply or their chat session replies up to a particular word count, right? Essentially to mean that therapists can't write a 5,000 word essay to each individual client and then be compensated per word, right? Therapists are, however, allegedly stating that they have been compensated up to a particular word count and then no longer receiving compensation after that word count. So the problem with this is, I think, a couple of things. First of all, the typical compensation plan for therapists is either per hour or per client. If you're in private practice, those therapists essentially charge a rate that allows them to cover their costs and to make a living wage and cover, certain things, especially if you're working with insurance. But if you work at a group practice or in community mental health, it's common for folks to get compensated per session, right? To tell a therapist that you're getting compensated up to a particular word count and then after that point you're essentially working for free is a pretty abnormal way of handling the thing, I would say, if that is in fact true. And the issue with this is that it essentially deters or demotivates the therapists from being emotionally engaged after a certain point, especially because the chat sessions are not structured in a typical way where, you're meeting for an hour or whatever, right? The burden of attention is pretty high there. And so if therapists are being told you're only getting compensated up to a particular word count and then you're essentially working for free and also are working a lot of hours, that can create a problem, right? This is the other allegation with the BetterHelp payment structure, which is that a lot of therapists have alleged that they are pretty heavily encouraged in a very intense way, sometimes allegedly, to take on more clients than they can realistically work with in an I don't know, in a healthy way, I would say. So with these two things combined, right, therapists alleging that they're being encouraged to take on more clients than they realistically should, and also being told that you're supposed to be available all the time. However, you're not going to get compensated after you've said X amount of words to this client. We run into a problem, right? This is why AI has sort of entered the chat. That wasn't on purpose. And so that's kind of where the center of these allegations come from, which is that the theory is that if these therapists are in fact using AI, it might be to alleviate the heavy workload that they find themselves under, right? Copy pasting from a chatbot to respond to clients, especially after a word point, can alleviate some of those problems. Except that fucking sucks, right? The first thing that I want to talk about as far as my issues with this are, first of all, the trust, right? If you are a client who finds out that your therapist has been using a fucking chatbot to regurgitate responses to you, that fucking stings, right? I think a lot of people are familiar with the level of emotional vulnerability that therapy requires. And to spill your guts about something and to find out that your therapist is going like, copy, paste, is a really painful thing, actually, especially because those emotional and vulnerable disclosures, sometimes those are the first time that somebody might have actually said that thing to a person, and they're looking for support, right? Besides the fact that they're looking for support, I would say most, if not all people, are coming to therapy because they desire some kind of transformation, right? I don't think anybody shows up to therapy, especially because it's expensive. It's not a resource that is accessible to all people. And so we're not here to fuck around, right? I know very few people who show up to therapy for the express purpose of just kind of like, and like not really hoping to see a change. Even when clients might struggle to engage in a vulnerable way, they still want to change. They just might be afraid of change, right? So for a client to find out that their therapist is not really effectively engaging is a real problem, not just for that therapeutic relationship specifically, but for their ability to trust therapists and want to engage in therapeutic services moving forward. This has been my beef with BetterHelp forever, potentially a part of their past allegations. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. The allegations that BetterHelp has faced in the past have also kind of been in a similar vein, right? That the way that clients have engaged with BetterHelp's therapeutic services could potentially, if those allegations were in fact true, cause folks to turn away from therapy altogether or for a long period of time, which generally speaking, as far as like the overall public is concerned, is a fucking bad thing, right? I don't know if you've looked around lately, but all of us are very much struggling and in need of therapy. And so in a world where folks are struggling to a degree that I think is probably higher than, it has been in a really long time, we shouldn't be turning people away from therapy or mental health services by providing them with a shit-all experience for just kind of like fucking no reason. That sucks, right? The other issue herein, though, is that folks who are choosing to use AI chatbots, if they are using AI chatbots, allegedly, could put themselves at risk as far as liability and the legality and the morality of these things regarding their license, but also regarding their professional code of ethics, right? In case you're not familiar, therapists are legally required to abide by rules and statutes that are approved by the particular state that they find themselves in. For the United States, I don't know a whole lot about how rules and statutes work in the broader world because I'm American and we're obsessed with ourselves. I'm so sorry. I'm working on it, I promise. And for their particular profession, there's often an overarching code of ethics, right? So I am a licensed clinical social worker, which means that I am duty bound to abide by the National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics. Both of those things, the rules and statutes and the code of ethics, place a pretty heavy burden or duty on a therapist to behave in a way that's ethical, that's moral, that's safe, and that promotes the well-being of their clients overall. This means that it's paramount for us to keep in mind our clients' safety, their well-being, that we're not engaging with clients in a dishonest or disingenuous way, that therapists don't present themselves in a way that is dishonest about their skill set, but also that we are maintaining their confidentiality above all else. In case you're not familiar, confidentiality is super fucking important for therapists. This is also going to come up later when we talk about BetterHelp's former allegations about their privacy policy. And so all of these things are very, very important as far as therapy is concerned and the therapeutic relationship is concerned. And an AI chatbot doesn't really fit in great with those things, right? It's a confidentiality risk. It potentially puts therapists in a spot where they're not behaving honestly or genuinely. It also poses a risk as far as therapists potentially presenting themselves as being competent or proficient in therapy modalities or therapy issues that they might not be. So this is a fucking ethical guidelines trauma soup nightmare, right? Generally speaking, I would say most professionals are going to steer away from the use of AI because there are so many fucking risks with doing so. So that sort of leads us to a broader question about like, what if this is happening? Why is this happening, right? The conversation that we had earlier about the alleged overworking and underpayment of BetterHelp therapists potentially provides us an answer for that, if that is in fact true, and if BetterHelp therapists have in fact done this in the past, as these only purported allegations have stated. Also, get used to it. I'm so sorry. I know it's really annoying. I'm not in the business of collecting cease and desist letters again. I feel like I keep saying that and I keep getting them. For what it's worth, there have been studies conducted about the use of AI in therapy generally, and those studies have actually corroborated what I think a lot of us already intuitively know, which is that AI is not a person, right? Even when in this particular study, these participants noted that the responses they received, well, let me back up. There was a study that was conducted where participants agreed to be subjected to research in this kind of vein, right? And essentially what took place is that there were statements made by these participants that were then provided to, an AI model that was asked to sort of respond in like a therapeutic way, right? Those responses were then approved by a therapist to make sure that they're something like a therapist would actually say and sort of fit within that general mold. Then those responses were forwarded to the participants. The study participants essentially reported the answers that they were receiving were technically correct, but that they didn't feel supported still. This kind of touches at the heart of the issue for a lot of folks, which is that if you wanted to be therapized by AI or ChatGPT, you would, right? Especially because there are a lot of free AI models that someone could easily access on the internet. You could simply write, like, how do I cope with anxiety, right? Because this is the thing. AI is good at regurgitating answers. It's good at summarizing things. It's good at compiling fact-based things. For example, what are the typical modalities for cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And AI could pretty easily regurgitate those things because a lot of it is fact-based and it's easily available on the internet. So you can train an AI to spit this stuff out like an input-output machine. That's essentially what an AI is, right? The problem with this, though, is that it lacks the inherent human connection aspect of therapy that's incredibly transformative and very important for folks to actually feel supported. We do have very compelling research to support the truth, which is that therapy is most effective when the relationship between a therapist and a client, when that relationship is functioning effectively, right? When we have a good, like, synergistic relationship with a client and a therapist with healthy boundaries and all of those things, right? Therapy interventions are going to be a whole lot more effective. This is because, essentially, in order for us to really grow and to feel safe to do that, we require human connection. This is at the crux of why therapy is such a difficult thing to train, because we can educate people about therapy modalities, right? We can teach people coping strategies. We can provide people with research about safe practice, about evidence-based practice. And there is just nothing that you can do to change the fact that if a therapeutic relationship is not functioning correctly, that it's going to become a problem and you might actually struggle to really make good progress. This is why it's very important for people to vibe with their therapists, for example. We've talked about that a lot on the channel. I'll put a playlist up here. So the use of AI responses to clients raises a lot of red flags in terms of the efficacy of that service, the safety of that service, the legality of that service, and also the trust in a therapeutic relationship being pretty easily annihilated, I would say, if a client finds out that that's what we're doing, which for the record is pretty easy to do for those of us that are, I would say, like, proficient or aware of the popularity of AI. It's pretty common, I would say, for folks to be able to clock when a response feels regurgitated, right? There's a lot of hallmarks about AI, especially like chat, that feels very false and very phony. It's trying to imitate the warmth with which human beings communicate with each other because it's been trained to. But essentially all it does is like a bad cosplay of active listening, right? It just sort of repeats back to you what you said with slightly different words, which in theory is what reflective listening is. But it's not, actually. And so the human element, the warmth there, is lacking. which again creates a lot of problems for that being a substitute for therapy. Okay, so let's double back to BetterHelp. The company, for what it's worth, BetterHelp has responded, and they did refute the allegation, stating, and I quote, "To be clear, BetterHelp expressly prohibits therapists from disclosing any member, personal, or health information to third-party AI." Third-party AI. To me, that's a real fucking weird phrase to use when refuting the allegation that your therapists don't, in fact, use AI or that they're prohibited from using AI. I don't know that we would need to specify that we're using or that they're not allowed to use third-party AI. I think that's a little odd. I'm not asserting or insinuating that BetterHelp has their own AI model, but I do think that if folks had that feeling or had a suspicion about that based on this statement, I would understand why they felt that way, because the statement itself does seem to be structured in a way that could be confusing to consumers depending on what their initial thought process was. So again, I'm not asserting that, I'm not saying that, but I have heard other folks feel that way, and quite frankly, I understand why they do. For what it's worth, also, I think BetterHelp's reputation precedes them in this matter, because in the past, notably when BetterHelp sent me a cease and desist letter, seen here, I'll put that up on the screen, and also sending me a pretty disconcerting and off-putting voicemail, which I'll play for you now.
Hi, Mickey. My name is, and I help run BetterHelp's YouTube creator program, actually, and I just wanted to give you a call to see if you'd be willing to speak about the video and if I can help address any of your concerns that you mentioned in the video, and also discuss what specifically you think we can do better as a company. I'd love to have that conversation. You could give me a call back. That would be fantastic. My number is, and I really appreciate your time and hope your morning's going well. So thank you so much. I look forward to speaking soon. Bye.
Because BetterHelp insisted that I was breaking the law by reporting about allegations that their company sold and gave their user data or gave their user data away to third-party advertisers, allegedly, even though BetterHelp would go on to later face FTC fines to the tune of millions of dollars, by the way, for those very allegations. Fuck you, BetterHelp, for that, by the way, which ultimately culminated in me having to take a video down because the cease and desist letter insisted that I should. The use of tricky language and verbiage was, I would say, a lot of people's frustration with BetterHelp's insistence in that situation that they were not, in fact, doing the thing that the FTC did find that they were financially liable for doing. So I could understand why folks might feel like in this situation, the use of, for example, the phrase third-party AI might raise some eyebrows, right? Because BetterHelp's strategy of potentially, allegedly, using tricky verbiage to avoid criticism has been frustration for BetterHelp consumers and BetterHelp, dissenters alike. And so in this situation, again, I think BetterHelp's reputation precedes them here. It's really not doing them any favors in terms of buying them credit with the public at large. I also want to pause here to talk about another class action lawsuit that is currently taking place against BetterHelp. As recently as 6 months ago, there is documentation on classaction.org that states, and I quote, "The 13-page lawsuit accuses BetterHelp of misleading patients about its mental health services, particularly when it comes to the capacity of its provider network. According to the complaint, the defendant, quote, lures customers by claiming to have the, quote, world's largest network of licensed, accredited, and experienced therapists, end quote, available to match them with providers suitable for their specific needs." So essentially, there are a couple of plaintiffs, according to this class action lawsuit, that state that their experience with BetterHelp culminated in them being matched with a therapist who not only did they not like, but that they were actively uncomfortable with or felt unsafe with. For example, there's one plaintiff who states that they opened services with BetterHelp for the purpose of working with a therapist who specialized in LGBTQ plus issues, and that allegedly that client was paired with a therapist who, quote, was not accepting of and highly antagonistic toward members of the LGBTQ community. The article that I'm going to reference for you, I'll probably put it up on the screen so you can see it, but I'll also put it in the description. This client alleges that they were made to feel guilt and shame through the course of those therapy sessions because that therapist was allegedly antagonistic towards LGBTQ people. There have been many clients, BetterHelp users, who have alleged in this class action lawsuit that they received similar treatment or struggled with similar issues with their BetterHelp therapist. For example, there was one client who asked to be matched with a female African-American therapist who was later allegedly matched with a white male therapist. This also kind of gets at the core of what a lot of therapists have alleged as well, which is that because the BetterHelp model attracts more clients than they can effectively accommodate, that allegedly BetterHelp will pressure therapists or really encourage therapists, allegedly, to work with clients that they are either not suited for, that they don't want to work for or with, rather, or that they don't have space for. This alleged behavior or culture has allegedly culminated in therapists being overworked and underpaid, like we talked about earlier, but also has meant that clients have received subpar treatment that they weren't happy with, or treatment that was, in their case or in their experience, dangerous or unsafe, or at the very least unfulfilling to them, allegedly. The issue with this is that in traditional therapy practice, you are probably familiar with the way that, for example, my books are full, right? I don't have room on my schedule for clients anymore. And so at the present moment, if somebody reaches out to me asking for services, that I will tell them I am full and I no longer have space. I'm so sorry. Here are some resources that I have for folks available locally. Also, as a caveat, if you have emailed me asking for therapy services with me, please know, first of all, I'm full. Second of all, I cannot work with anyone outside the state of Arizona because I'm not licensed to. And thirdly, I receive hundreds of emails from you guys every single day. Hundreds of emails from you. And so I know that I have not responded to all of you. It's not because I don't like you or because I don't care about you. It is because it is simply an unrealistic and inhuman effort to respond to hundreds of emails every day. So if you have emailed me, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I don't have room for my for new clients on my books. So that's typically how it looks though, right? You might also be familiar with the practice of wait lists and things like that. When a practice is full, they might say, we don't have room at present. However, one of our therapists plans to discharge a few of their clients in 4 weeks or 6 weeks, right? And so we can put you on a wait list, and then when we have availability open up, we can call you, right? This is another common and perfectly ethical practice for folks to engage in because you're being clear and open about the wait time, about the lack of availability, and you're providing clients with a choice that they can either opt into or opt out of. And even after their number comes up on the wait list, they have the option to still opt out at that point. Maybe they found another therapist, et cetera, right? The issue with just saying, yeah, come on in to any Tom, Dick, or Harry who signs up for a service is that we can potentially run into a situation where folks might not have availability, but if they're pressured into taking those clients anyways, then both the therapist and the client suffer. If that were in fact true, that the allegations against BetterHelp doing this are actually the case. So there is this class action lawsuit also brewing against BetterHelp based upon these allegations. I just want to ground us all in the reality that BetterHelp being used as this very large-scale platform for therapy and mental health services creates a lot of problems, potentially, allegedly. The first of which being that, first and foremost, the company, it's a large corporation, right? Who, historically, if you've lived in the United States for any amount of time, they care a lot about money. They care an awful lot about profit margins, about advertising, about money in corporate pockets, right? Or in CEO pockets, right? It's also common for those prices to continue to go up and up and up and up. And don't get me wrong, therapists are, as individuals and in small practices, those therapists are in fact raising their prices to compensate for the fact that, for example, our cost of living is fucking skyrocketing, but that's not because those folks are large corporations who are functioning solely on greed. And I'm not alleging that BetterHelp is doing that. However, I would just like to draw everybody's attention to the fact that historically, statistically, in the United States, that tends to be the case for large corporations. And so to assume that BetterHelp is the one exception in the historical track record of corporations seeking profit over people, that's an interesting expectation to have. I don't know that would be a good bet if we were gambling, for example. The other issue here is that, again, the model is such that you sign up for a membership rather than there being an evaluation of, are there therapists in your area who specialize in your issue? Are there therapists in your area who specialize in your issue and have space on their books? Are there therapists in your area who specialize in your issue and have space on their books and want to work with or are qualified to work with someone like you based on what you're wanting and needing and looking for? That's a whole hell of a lot of boxes to check that could be very difficult to meet, right? On top of that, again, I want to remind us all that BetterHelp's reputation does very much precede itself in this area, given what the FTC has to say about BetterHelp. And so my beef is not with people using BetterHelp. If you're a BetterHelp user and you like the app or you enjoy the services or you've had really great experiences there, I think that's wonderful. And I am happy for you, truly. I really am. As a therapist, ultimately what I care about is people being okay and being safe and people feeling good. That's the whole point, right? So this is not me telling everyone, get off BetterHelp. That's not what this is about. If you're on BetterHelp and you like it and you want to stay there, then I think you have the right to stay there, right? If you're a therapist who works with BetterHelp and you like your client caseload, you're having a great experience, your client seems to be happy, healthy, and safe, then that's great. Keep doing whatever it is that you want to keep doing, right? And I think that people should have the right to make conscientious and informed decisions about their own health care across the board, by the way. Sorry, Gustafer. This is no different. I think that if folks want to engage with BetterHelp, they want to work with BetterHelp, they want a BetterHelp membership, or you're a therapist who wants to work with them or curate a client caseload on BetterHelp, that's perfectly within your right to do as an individual, and I think we should have all of the information available to us before we make decisions about doing those things. If there are glaring problems with, for example, a doctor's office, usually one of the first things that we'll do is look at the reviews from former patients. And I think for a doctor's office, if a doctor's office, for example, started sending out cease and desist letters to people who said, hey, I didn't like this, or news organizations that said, hey, these people said that they didn't like this doctor's office, that's a fucking problem, right? That's a highly inappropriate practice to partake in. And I'm not saying that BetterHelp has done that, but I am saying that I received a cease and desist letter from BetterHelp when I reported on allegations that BetterHelp was doing X, Y, and Z things with their privacy policy. And I don't know that that's a great reputation for a company to have that touts themselves as an accessible platform to promote the well-being and the mental health of all of their consumers. I think that's a weird choice to make, personally. I think that's a weirdo fucking choice to make and doesn't make me feel great about the professional culture and the values of that corporation. So again, I want to be clear, if you like BetterHelp and you're enjoying that, or you're a therapist who works there, that's great. That's your business. That's your choice. And I'm not here to tell you that my way of doing therapy is better or the best, because that's not true. Therapy is inherently personal and customized to the individual. And I think everybody should have access to the information that's relevant for you to make that choice. So let me know what your thoughts are about this. If you have other things about BetterHelp that you think or feel in those comments, please feel free to do that, because I, unlike BetterHelp, don't send cease and desist letters to people who simply share their feelings about things. And I certainly don't have a big fancy legal department who's going to leave people weird voicemails on their birthday. So I love you all so very much. Let me know what your thoughts and feelings are. Don't forget to like the video. That's very nice if you do that. Thank you. And then you can subscribe to stay here. We talk about stuff like this and also pop culture stuff that you could stay for. And then you can share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I'll see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.